Blueprint interfaces are used instead of casting for a blueprint communication. And we usually use blueprint interfaces so that we can avoid casting. And as you can see here in the player, we did in the player base, we did this casting. And to avoid hide references that needs to load in the game before the main menu and slows the game, we create blueprint interface to avoid these casting. So let's go ahead and create one and let's see what it's all about. So over in the blueprints folder, I'm going to right click and make a new folder. And I'm going to call this one interfaces or interface. And let's go into that folder. And inside of here, let's right click, go to blueprint and select blueprint interface. Usually for interfaces, I usually call them int as a prefix. And right now you have to call it what you are trying to reference to. So I'm trying to reference to my player controller. So I'm going to call this one player controller. I'm going to go inside of here, and this is the blueprint interface. Now, just keep in mind that blueprint interfaces are usually difficult for beginners, but try to understand them, and it's actually very, very easy to understand. So let's just try to make one and see what happens. So inside of a blueprint interface, you have this view, and you can't really do anything inside of here. You can't drag or do anything. The only thing you can do is over here in the functions, you can create a function. So the function I want to make now, if you click F2 on the keyboard, you can change the name of this. And I just want to call it get player controller ref. And I'm trying with this function, I'm trying to get the player controller's reference so I can avoid this casting here. So over here, I'm going to click on this function I just made. I'm going to create an output. And here in the outputs, I'm going to select the blueprint class I'm trying to reference to. Now I'm trying to reference to my player controller PC Counter-Strike. This is what we called it. And select the object reference. So select here in the variables, you have to select the blueprint class you are trying to reference to. I'm going to call this one player controller. And now this function is finished. So very, very simple. Remember to press on compile here, very important, and go ahead and save. Now we have this simple function. Now what we can do with this is now let's open up the player controller. If I go to blueprints and I open up the player controller, and inside of here, let's open up the full blueprint editor and then go ahead and select class settings. And in the class settings down here, you can now add the blueprint interface. Let's click here and search for int. And here it is, the interface we just made. So go ahead and select it. And when you select the blueprint interface, you might notice that over here to the left, you see this tab now. This is a new tab that just appeared called interfaces. And inside of here, you can see the function we just made inside of this blueprint interface. So now it has appeared when you add the blueprint interface. And if you double click this function and you go inside of it, now you can set this variable here. So we created this player controller variable, but now, right now it is empty. So what we need to do, we need to drag from this and then we write self. And what does that mean? So let me actually do it again. Maybe it was too quick. So dragging from here and writing self, and then select this one, get a reference to self. So what that means is, let me actually just go back here. We made the blueprint interface here, and we made that function inside of it. And here for the variables, we selected the variable we wanted to reference to. Now inside of the player controller, when we added the interface through the class settings, it appeared here, the function. And inside of here, for this variable, we are writing self. So what that means is we're just telling the engine what this player controller variable is. Because if I hold control and click here and disconnect it, the engine will never know what this variable is. If it stands like this, it is empty, the variable is empty, and you will get error in your game. But if we do a self-reference, what that means is, it means this variable is self. Remember, we are inside of the player controller, so we're basically defining this player controller variable. We're telling the engine it is this player controller that I am in right now. It is self. So self-reference means whatever blueprint class I am inside of right now, which is the player controller. So we just defined it here. So go ahead and compile and save. And what we can do now we are finished with this. Now we can go to the player and let's go ahead and delete this. And what we can do now is we can drag from the controller and then write the function that we called it here, the name of it, get player controller reference. So I can drag from here and say get player, and then you can see it appears here from the interface, blueprint interface that we made. It says get player controller reference. This is the function we just made. And when it says message at the end, this means it comes from a blueprint interface. So go ahead and select it. And this icon here, it just means that it comes from a blueprint interface. And now we have it. Now we avoid casting, we avoid the hard references, and our game is more optimized performance-wise as well. So you can now just go ahead and connect it. And now it knows that this player controller that we are referencing to is our PC Counter-Strike player controller, because for this variable here in the PC Counter-Strike, we went ahead and wrote self. So it actually now knows what we are talking about here. So this might be a bit confusing to begin with if you have never used Blueprint's interfaces before, but very, very handy to avoid casting. We just created the Blueprint interface. We then went ahead and selected the Blueprint class we want to reference to. And then we went ahead inside of the Blueprint class we're trying to reference to, we added that Blueprint interface, and this one appeared. Then inside of here, we did a self-reference, and from that later now, we can now use it here where we can say get controller and then get the player controller reference just like that and avoid casting. All right, so that was it for the Blueprint interface. We are going to have more examples in the future. If this was a bit difficult, please take a look at my Discord server or take a look at pixelhelmet.com. I am very, very happy to help you out 24/7. So let's go ahead and click on File, Save All, and let's continue to the next lesson.